I'm going to finish the coverage of material from factors influencing learning with a short separate section on metacognition. Two reasons. One, I think it's pretty important. And two, I have a little bit of PowerPoint that I want to share with you about a little kind of like a research project that I did with a class a couple years ago. Right, so to be able to guide our own learning effectively, we must be able to evaluate the progress of our learning. The idea of metacognition is it is our thinking about our thinking, right? It's our knowledge about how our own cognitive processes think, or work rather. Um, so, for example, do you think you have a good memory? And then do you actually have a good memory if you say yes? That's effective metacognition, knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. So for example, my memory. I have a really good memory for knowing whether or not I have said something. I have a really bad memory for knowing whom I've said it to. Right? You ever play trivia games? I don't like playing trivia games because I don't like playing with people who have bad metacognition. You ask them a question, and they say, wait a minute, I know the answer to this. Just give me a minute. Wait, just give me a minute. Right? And you're waiting, and you're waiting, and waiting, and finally they give up. And you tell them the answer, and they're like, oh, wait, I didn't know that. Right? So they obviously didn't. When I play trivia games, if you ask me a question, I will do one of two things. I will either instantly tell you the answer, or I will instantly tell you I don't know the answer. And in that case, when you tell me what the answer is, I'm like, yep, I didn't know it. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. One other example of a breakdown in metacognition, because that kind of leads to the little mini research project that I did. You ever had the experience of walking out of an exam thinking that you did pretty well, and then getting your exam score back and realizing that you didn't do well? Right? You thought you knew it. You even thought you knew it while you were answering the questions, but you didn't. Here is kind of a research-based illustration of that very phenomenon. What we've got here is a scatter plot, and by now you've read about scatter plots. We may have talked about them in class, depending on when you're watching this video, but just in case you need a reminder, each little dot corresponds to a person, and this is a group of students in my general psychology classes one semester, and the all right, axis down here, this is their estimated score. This is after they finished taking the test, right? And before they got their score, of course, I asked them, how many points you think you just got? There were 60 points on the test, okay? And then the actual score, right, what they actually did earn. So for example, this person here walked out of that test saying, I think I got 60 out of 60. Okay, but in reality, they only got 36 out of 60. Okay. First thing you could ask the question is, well, what's the correlation? What's the correlation between the estimated score and the actual score? And it turns out it's on the moderate side, right? So 0.38. So we're okay, but not that good, really. And the way you can see that, remember from how we talk about correlations, we've got that diagonal line, right? That's going to show kind of perfect metacognition, where You thought you got 40 and you got 40, right? You thought you got 50 and you got 50. The fact that we're kind of spread out from that line indicates that, again, we're not terrific at um, um, knowing how well we did right after we take the test. But actually, if you look at the different patterns for different types of students, it gets more interesting, right? So, for example, let's define um, up below 45 as not doing very well on this exam. Okay, and then above 45 is people who did pretty well. The first thing you can notice from that group that's shaded right now, they're actually more spread out. Right, they're more spread out than the group above. Right, so we got people here, we got people here. Right, so the whole spread here. Okay, compared to up here, they're kind of more tightly clustered around the line. So people who are scoring lower do a worse job of estimating how well they did. Okay. It gets even more interesting when you look at the very specific pattern of misestimations. People who scored lower, below 45, notice they are more prominently featured below the diagonal than above the diagonal. Whereas the people who scored higher, they're more evenly split between being below the diagonal and above the diagonal. That means that people who scored low are more likely to have thought they did better than they did. Right, so for example, look at the person all the way over on the right. They thought they got a 60 out of 60, but they only got a 37. Right, look at the person down at the bottom, got a 21 and thought that they got a 53. Okay, those are people who you might actually judge as being overconfident. They thought they did better than they actually did, and it's 70% of the students who scored low. All right, the people who scored higher, only 45% were overconfident. Now, sometimes teachers think that students are lazy. Right? They just don't work hard enough. Okay? Yeah, I suppose some students are. But sometimes they think they got it. Sometimes they think they've actually studied hard enough. Because don't you think that the very same students who walked out of the test thinking they did well are the same students who the night before said, "That's it, I got it. Right? I've studied enough." Indeed, that is the case. And shows you a pretty good example, a pretty good illustration of the dangers of not knowing what you know, right? Not having solid, effective metacognition.